Welcome to episode 158 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing screenwriter and directing duo Lisa Robinson and Annie J. Howell. They just did a film called Claire in Motion. We talked through the early days of their career and how they got this film produced, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 158. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing screenwriter and directors Lisa Robinson and Annie J. Howell. Here is the interview. Welcome, Lisa and Annie, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a little overview of your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business? Maybe, Lisa, you can go first and then Annie can follow up with her story.
Sure. I spent most of my younger years in California. I was really interested in photography in high school, and then I went to UC Berkeley and ended up being a film studies major. I had an opportunity to do some directing and shooting while I was there, and fell in love with film. Fell in love with cameras as well. I thought, 16 millimeter was exciting, and I love the technical aspect of that as well. And then I worked mostly in experimental film and I really wanted to tell stories. And so I went to NYU Film School, and there, I was really able to get more into narrative filmmaking. And that's where, I started making short films and met Annie and, the rest, and then went on from there.
Perfect. Annie, maybe you can give us a similar kind of background story.
Yeah, sure. I am an Arizona native, so we're both from the West. We're both in New York now. But I did not really find film until after my undergraduate work. I, studied English literature and studio art up at Whitman College in Washington State. And then I moved to New York kind of looking for an art form to explore. I had been working in theater in Seattle for several years and really loved it, but also knew that it wasn't quite the right fit for me. And when I moved to New York, I just started seeing all these people making films on the street, and I was like, what is going on here? So how could this be so sort of public, this art making? It was just so intriguing to me, and I was in New York taking some grad classes in a different program and sort of on a whim, well, not really a whim, but decided to apply to film school and started really watching movies in my 20s, and so ended up in grad school at NYU, and then just like Lisa, made a series of shorts. We sort of found each other and were friends and made a web series together, and then that led to these 2 features that we've made, this most recent one being Claire in Motion.
Okay, perfect. So let's just get a little bit, sort of connect the dots on that. On your IMDb page, there's a short film called Breaker. Was that something you guys did in film school, or was that after film school?
That was actually my short film that I made, and we both made several short films within film school. That was a thesis film I made.
I see.
And so, yeah, and we were students in different grade levels, I guess you could say, in the graduate program, and so we knew each other. And it was only after film school that we started hanging out, and we were both working on getting our individual features made and sort of playing the waiting game, waiting for casting to complete, waiting for fundraising to complete. And so that's where we sort of got inspired, like, let's do something right now. Let's make something together and pool our resources and do it right now. And so that's when we made the web series Sparks. And that's a series that sort of was our first collaboration and inspired our first feature film, Small, Beautifully Moving Parts, that we also made together. And so that was sort of the trajectory between grad school and our feature film.
Okay. And can you talk just a minute, sort of the logistics of getting those off the ground? Were they fully self-funded? Did you go out and raise money? How did you kind of get the resources together to make those films, the web series and then the film?
You just named all of it. Yeah. We greenlit these films, basically. So when we made the web series, it was, okay, help me with the year here, Lisa. It was a while ago. I'd say 2000-something, early 2000. Yeah, 2005. I would say 2004, 2005. There weren't that many web series being produced yet. And that was an intriguing form for us. And it was obviously pretty, relatively easy to use the resources that we already had, and we made it, very much just the two of us and actors. And then I think from there, we just saw that we could really, as the technology had been changing over the years, we could really get a lot done with a small amount of people. And so our first film was shot with the DSLR that had just been released. And that was sort of a new thing on the scene as well. So we were a very small crew for Small, Beautifully Moving Parts. We sort of fit into one vehicle. We kind of laughed that, it was a road movie and we really experienced the road, and we would pick up crew and actors on the different stops in the story, but then we would pile back into the van, and we kind of laughed that we knew if we expanded to more than one vehicle, we weren't going to be able to make the film. So it was really an achievable kind of venture that was written for locations that we already knew, and just, having the confidence of having made the web series with just the two of us, we felt like, oh, we can do this. We can just sort of expand slightly and make something that we can actually see how we can achieve that.
I see. And then just take us quickly through, so you have Small, Beautiful Moving Parts, and then take us through how did that ultimately lead to Claire in Motion? Just in terms of more of just the logistics, did you get it in some film festivals? Did you help you get an agent? Did it help you raise money for Claire in Motion? Just take us through maybe that sort of part of it.
Sure. Yeah, Small, Beautifully Moving Parts premiered at South by Southwest, and we had a really healthy festival run. It won the Sloan Award at the Hampton Film Festival and some other awards as well. And we actually had a release for that film, which was amazing to us, given that, it was such a small film to begin with. And so it was released by Film Movement. And so, we felt pretty good about that, and we were thinking, okay, what's our next project? And so Claire in Motion was something that we started writing while Annie was living in Ohio. So she moved to Ohio for a couple of years in Athens, Ohio, and so while she was there, we were writing it. I was here in New York, she was in Ohio, and we were sort of getting that going. We could talk more about the writing later, but just in terms of logistics, we had some award money from our first film, Small, Beautifully, and so we pulled that with some grants to sort of get us going, and then we had private investors come in to help us, make the film, and around that time, Betsy Brandt decided to do the film, and so it all kind of came together. Again, it was a smaller film, not as small as Small, Beautifully, and we were able to sort of pool, again, like our resources in terms of shooting in a small town where Annie was present and sort of using everything we could to make this come together. So that premiered at South by Southwest.
Okay, perfect. So let's dig into
Claire.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I answered enough logistic questions.
Oh, sure. So let's dig into Claire in Motion. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or logline for that film.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the story of a small town college professor she's a math professor who sort of thinks she knows, is in a time of her life where she has a strong sense of who she is and her work and her relationships, and that's all completely turned upside down when her husband, who's also a professor, goes on to one of these survivalist hikes that he's been training for and just never comes back. So at that point, she starts to discover some things about him that she didn't know, and that kind of throws her into a state of questioning almost everything, including her own identity, and sort of a psychological kind of twist on the missing person thriller.
Perfect. Now, where did this story come from? What was sort of the genesis of the idea?
Well, we bounced around a lot of ideas. We knew we wanted to tell a story about identity, and we were interested in telling a story about a woman who, was established, in her career, sort of in her late 30s, early 40s, kind of established in her life. And we wanted to, see how she dealt with some type of loss that throws her into a new space, in both a really difficult and also kind of interesting way. And so, in brainstorming stories, Annie was in Athens, Ohio. She'd send me pictures of the town, and they were there were some amazing photos that were really inspiring. Where coming from New York, I was looking at these pictures from a different perspective too. So between both our brains, we started to build this picture of this kind of a dreamscape of what Athens, Ohio really is, a kind of more gothic tint to it, and looking at a small college town, this part of the world, that hasn't been filmed that much, and particularly not in this way, just looking at the town and seeing it as like this fertile ground for a story. And so, that's where the idea came, like, let's make her a professor in this town. Let's make this, family live there. And then thinking about, what kind of event, would really sort of pierce her sort of, fixed idea of what her life was, and so that all evolved. And of course there are true stories about this happens, people do go missing in one way or another, and the people they leave behind, like, their story is really interesting to us, and like the kind of uncertainty that creates, just it was something we wanted to dive into. So it was a slow cooked story over a period of time, and a lot of it came from, Annie's real life on the ground, walking around this town, meeting people, thinking about what it is to live there, and then also my perspective, kind of looking in on that and seeing it also from other ways, That was how it evolved.
Yeah. So let's. You just said you were brainstorming ideas. I always like to just get a sense of sort of the scope of what something like that looks like. How many ideas did you guys come up with before you landed on this idea that you wanted to really flesh out? Was it a dozen ideas, 100 ideas? Just some rough idea about how many story ideas maybe you discarded along the way.
I would say like 6 months worth.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the emphasis on slow cook. We had been talking about making a science fiction film for quite a while, and we sort of truly moved away from that in service, I think, probably being more inspired by the landscape and what that could give to kind of this, as we was calling, like, this sort of dreamscape, that had a really good fit for this kind of slow burn thriller. And, there were some things, some parts of the idea creation that kind of stayed with us. Like, there was always a professor involved. There was always the element of small town, obviously, because we knew we were going to shoot there. So genre kind of shifted a little bit in this particular development process, with some hangovers coming into original ideas that made their way into something different. So that was kind of an interesting process to see it through type, more or less, but with some of the themes really hanging on. this sort of like, what does it mean to be at a certain point in life? This is the more relatable stuff, obviously, because we don't have any experience with, a dire event such as the tragedy of someone going missing in your life. Mm-hmm. But we were thinking a lot about identity kind of after you've hit a certain point in your career, or relationships after you've been in those relationships for a really long time. And that also is just really interesting to us because we don't see a lot of that on the screen in movies that make it, to your local art house or mainstream theater. So some of those ideas were always with us, but that idea development process really did kind of cycle through genre a little bit and definitely character. And then I think ultimately was inspired mostly by place and by our own feelings about certain topics that were really intriguing.
Yeah. So let's talk about your writing process a little bit. It sounds like you guys spend a lot of time just sort of mulling the idea over. But once you start actually, you've got an idea, do you guys then start outlining? And then how much time do you spend outlining versus actually opening up final draft and writing the script?
That's a good question. I think it varies on the projects. But in this one, we did spend a lot of time sort of collecting ideas and trying to get the main plot figured out as a guide, even though we had a strong sense of theme. And yes, we did. I visited Annie and we did some location scouting and also just spent, a lot of days in a room with a lot of index cards up on walls and moving things around and figuring out, where we're going to begin and end and what we wanted to happen. So I would say that took, a couple months to just sort of figure out what our outline was going to be and settle into that. And I think that that's really important when you're co-writing, to have a sense of, some sort of strong-ish sense of where you're going, even though that might change. Mm-hmm. And make sure that you're on the same page and that, you're really communicating. And then, once we start to write, we kind of tag team and we go back and forth a lot. Like we don't sit in the same room. Obviously we couldn't even sit in the same room at that time, but we even before that, we often, like, one of us writes about a 5 to 10 page chunk and then passes it back to the other who is a little rewriting, and we brainstorm if we want to change anything major, and then kind of continues. And so it's a little bit, it's a little bit of tag team back and forth at that point.
And it was interesting too because our first script was written like in a couple of months, mm-hmm. So it was really interesting to have these two projects have different gestation periods, so to speak. And I don't know, that was it just reminded me how much every script is really its own thing. Mm-hmm.
Are there any particular tools you guys use, collaboration tools? I know a lot of the screenwriting software is starting to get in the cloud so that, two people can work on the same project at the same time. How do you guys actually handle the logistics of sharing your work back and forth? Is it just literally just emailing final draft files back and forth, or is there some...
We're pretty old-fashioned. This was all pretty much email back and forth. We don't really do any live co-writing. So it was pretty traditional that way. But then, like, in between those writing sessions, there's thousands of texts being exchanged about just thinking out loud, really. And that's what's fun about co-writing and co-directing. Sometimes the conversation that you are having with yourself, instead in a co-situation, you're kind of, writing down to somebody else to kind of just hear what they have to say about your immediate thoughts or your concerns or your ideas.
Yeah. And how do you guys handle differences of opinion? I'm sure at some points there's some maybe different ideas, maybe bump into each other. How do you guys handle those sorts of situations?
At this point we have a really long relationship, so I feel like, we have a lot of respect for each other in terms of our opinions, and so I think we really listen and push back. We push back and forth, and I feel like that always leads to something kind of more interesting, and it's also good to have to. It's good to have to defend ideas too. Sometimes, you know, when you're by yourself, you don't really have to do that, and I think that can be useful because often you discover something else in that process, and or you know, you are convincing, and that's good too. Like you know, and I think that kind of process is pretty fruitful. You know, I think that when we don't agree, we just keep working. Like we kind of just keep working and keep pushing towards something else. It's kind of like an archaeological dig sometimes. You know, trying to find that like the best story within this idea, and it has to be a story that we're both really into. And so that's just sort of a given at the start, you know. So I think that you know, that guides us in a way, like, okay, this is a story we both have to be really into. And so there's a part that one of us is really pushing, the other isn't quite into it. It's just like we kind of keep shaping it, you know, and find it. And I think it's really pretty interesting that way.
How do you guys know when it's that draft is ready to start showing to other people? And then what does your sort of feedback look like? Do you have a few trusted friends you get feedback from and then go back and do a rewrite? But how do you guys handle that?
That was pretty much how it worked. You know, we just sort of instinctually arrived. No hard scientific formula on a draft that we thought was ready. And a pretty small group of friends, one or two friends who are really invested in screenwriting as well, would take a look. And I remember, we had pretty significant rewrites after that first time out. And then, you know, eventually, of course, we just ran out of time. Not that was like, oh, it's got to stop, but we felt pretty good about the script. So we kind of fell together this time in a really nice way because we you know, unlike other projects that are a little bigger than us, we're determining the schedule. We're determining really everything. And we're both professors, and there was a period of time that we both had free, and, you know, that month is approaching, and it's like time to start to get a casting director, and that time just eventually arrived.
Mm-hmm. So how can people see Claire in Motion? Do you guys know the release schedule?
So how can they see it?
Yep. Do you guys know the release schedule for it?
Yes, January 13th.
Okay.
It's going to be in 10 cities or more, and it'll be in LA, New York, and we can get you all the information, but it's also in Chicago,
Philadelphia, Cleveland.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can pull it up here.
Yes, you can go to our website, claireinmotion.com, and the theaters will be up there.
Okay.
You know, it's all sort of getting out right now before the holidays.
And we have we're a premium VOD selection, so through our distributor, Breaking Glass, so we'll have a day and date as well. So on the 13th of January, we should be on demand and hopefully on streaming a little bit later in the spring.
Okay, perfect. I will get the website and I will put it in the show notes so we have that and people can just click over to that. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Are you guys on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? Do you have a blog? Anything you're comfortable sharing? I will also put that in the show notes and people can kind of keep up with you, what you're doing.
I think Facebook is our most active social media point at this point. We are on Twitter at Claire in Motion as well, but we're really most active on Facebook, so we would love to see people there. In fact, it is.
Okay.
Facebook.com/Claire in Motion.
Perfect. So, guys, I really wish you luck with the film, and I really appreciate your coming on and talking with me today.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
I just want to mention two things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters find producers who are looking for material. First, I've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit one logline per newsletter. I went and emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far, I have well over 350 producers who have signed up to receive it. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. members. So if you want to participate in this pitch newsletter and get your script into the hands of lots of producers, sign up at sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. And secondly, I partner with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads sites, so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, I've been getting 10 to 12 high-quality paid leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or are looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from production companies looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas. Producers are looking for shorts, features, TV and web series pilots, so it's a huge array of different types of projects that these producers are looking for. And these leads are exclusive to our partner and SYS Select members. To sign up, go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Lisa and Annie. I think this is another great example of some folks who just went out and made their own breaks. Really listen to what they said about their first film. It was just them in a van driving around and shooting the film on a super low budget. They didn't have a huge crew. They didn't have tons of actors. Literally everybody could fit in one car. If you're not getting any traction with your writing, I think there is really no excuse to go out and try something like this. Camera equipment, editing equipment is so cheap these days. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably have everything you need to make a movie between your computer, your iPhone, maybe a small digital camera. They're talking about these DSLR cameras. Those have come down in price, and you can get some really high quality footage from these DSLR cameras now that are really very, very inexpensive. Well less than $1,000 can buy you a nice digital camera. But again, even if that's beyond your means at this point, you know, your iPhone, doing something on your phone, doing something just with whatever assets you have, getting something done. I've talked about this before numerous times on the podcast. If you have absolutely no production experience, you should probably start with a short film. Just make a 2 or 3 minute short film. Starting out and saying, well, I'm going to make a 90-minute feature, that might be a little much for someone without any production experience. But if you start to do short films, a 2 or 3 minute short film, over the course of a year, if you do 3 or 4 of these, you'll start to build up your confidence. You'll start to understand sort of what it takes to produce a film from beginning to end. And again, a 2 or 3 minute short film, it really should not be out of the reach of anybody who's listening to this podcast. So again, if you're finding, you know, you're not getting quite the traction you want with your writing, this might be a great chance to just take a step back. Listen to their story. Listen to what Lisa and Annie had to say. And it's now starting to snowball for them, and their careers are growing. Now their movies, their next movie has gotten bigger. Claire in Motion is a bigger budget than their first one. And that's just how things grow. And it's a sort of organic process. You don't really listen to Annie and Lisa and say, oh, they got really lucky, or, you know, they did this, that, and the other thing. And it was just this one thing that, you know, turned everything around. It was just a slow, gradual process of them getting better as filmmakers and slowly going up the food chain. And again, it's within everybody's means who's listening to this podcast. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.